southwestern Manitoba, the dirty 30s were underway. Farmers were eager to supplement their income by picking up extra work, and brothers John and Ole Nestebo found such work digging wells. Their work took them to this ravine on the Henderson farm near the village of Goodlands.
We were digging a well for water. It was the fall of 1931, and we were already feeling very keenly the impact of the Depression. As my brother and I were silently digging, we suddenly noticed that large chunks of coal were being brought up by the auger. Immediately, we hit upon the idea of developing a small mine as a possible source of income. You see, we had had no crop for 2 years.
So begins the story of Manitoba's only commercially successful coal mines. For a decade, 2 mines, each the direct result of the Nestebo brothers' discovery, provided a boost to Depression-era farm incomes and cheaper coal for consumers. The Industrial Revolution of the 1800s was coal-fired. Coal heated the boilers that powered the steam engines, that did the work at flour mills like this one in Boissevain. By the 1930s, hydropower and the gasoline engine were changing all that. But coal was still important, and having a ready supply was a real boost to a local economy. John Nestebo knew this and saw opportunity in those black chunks he had uncovered. Finding coal would have come as no shock. In fact, the first discovery of coal in the area was also the result of a well-digging operation a few kilometers south of Boissevain in 1879. Everyone knew there was coal there, lots of it, but several attempts to harvest it failed. The Manitoba Coal Company in particular made the news. In 1890, the local and provincial press offered glowing reports. Abundant, cheap coal was just around the corner. There was even talk of building a rail line to the site. Did reports such as these in the Manitoba Daily Free Press capture the spirit of the times, or did they create the spirit? On January 10th of 1890, they reported that it was
an excellent quality of lignite coal, very hard. Will supply local demands at once.
On January 29th, their reporter visited the site and under the headline, "Our Black Diamonds," filed a report that was subheaded,
"Mines of Manitoba Coal Company in operation. Output of 50 tons daily when railway connection secured."
Along with a glowing report of the region, he concluded that
there was an inexhaustible supply of coal in Turtle Mountain. The coal has been tested in many ways and has given entire satisfaction.
Other mines in that era included the Lennox Mine, the Vauden Mine, the Manitoba Coal Company, the Mackay Mine, and the MacArthur Mine. All were located on the western edge of Turtle Mountain, where deep creek beds allowed access to a coal seam. In the 20th century, geologists confirmed what the pioneers had suspected. There was lots of coal under Turtle Mountain. It's found in seams up to 2 meters thick, often separated by layers of clay which indicate different coal-forming swamps, one on top of the other. The deposits originated about 65 million years ago, when Turtle Mountain was a vast delta in a large sea. It was these thin layers of geological history that attracted the attention of the first coal miners. But there were problems from the start. The coal was damp. As one of the local customers later recalled,
"You had to wring the water out of it before you could burn it."
Water seepage was a big issue. This pump was used at the MacArthur mine to try to keep it dry. Despite high hopes, determined effort, and considerable investment, bringing this low grade of coal out of the earth and onto the market just didn't pay. so the coal stayed in the ground for a few decades longer. The Depression changed everything. Drought brought crop failures. The stock market crash brought low farm prices and unemployment. Cheaper coal would be popular, even if the locals called it Turtle Mountain mud. So when the Nestibo brothers, whose descendants still farm in the region, found what appeared to be a good supply, they quickly made a deal with the landowner, Mr. Henderson, to start a mine. Horses and cutters were used to strip off the soil and expose the coal. It was then picked and sorted. Within weeks, 40 tons of coal were removed and sales were being made at $2 a ton. It was a good start, with the Nestibos and Mr. Henderson splitting the proceeds. The next year, however, in a dispute over the sharing of those proceeds, the Nestibos decided to work the same deposit for Tom Salter, whose property sat right alongside the Henderson mine.
Just on the other side of the trees was the Kane or the Henderson mine. The Nestibos worked on the other side of the fence initially and then had an argument and over royalties, and then came on this side to the Salter farm. So we had the Nestibo operation working here full-fledged, and just on the other side of the trees was another fully occupied and operational mine that ran for 10 years.
George Kane took over the operation on the Henderson property, and thus, for several years, two side-by-side mines produced coal and provided jobs for the community. The Nestibo Salter mine operated during the winter from 1933 until 1938. After strip mining procedures had taken out the most accessible seam, two drift mines were tunneled into the west bank of the ravine, where they encountered two good seams of coal. This photo appears to be one of the early Nestibo drifts on the Henderson site. Eventually, a vertical shaft was sunk to 9.1 meters, with 3 tunnels reaching the seams.
Okay, this is the main shaft of the Nestibo mine, and there'd be tracks leading down into the main shaft. Once they hit the coal seam, they would flatten out and the miners would drill their own little shafts. Quite often the coal was in 2 layers with a top seam and a bottom seam. They dig out the fire clay in the middle, either pick or shovel the coal out or use explosives, blow it up and then come down and pick it up later. They would bring the coal to the main shaft. It would be hauled up here and it would be dumped at the top, sorted out into clumps of coal, and then loaded onto a truck for the market.
This overview shows the early stages of the Nestibo operation. The building in the foreground, with the clothes hanging out to dry, was the Nestibo family residence. The coal shack was just to the left of the house, and the building with the flag on it was the dynamite shed. Over time, various changes made the operation more efficient. For example, a closed-in coal storage building with a tramway leading from the main shaft replaced the simple loading platform. These were family operations. Mrs. Nestibo and Mrs. Kane did a tremendous amount of work looking after a staff of up to 40 miners, cooking, doing laundry, generally taking care of the workers. Their workday would start very, very early. This photo shows both mines. The Henderson property is on the left side of the fence, opposite the Salter mine on the right. These miners are gathered near an entrance to a drift mine. Often, miners worked in pairs. The main shaft was probably high enough to walk upright, but when you got to your own side shaft, it was only about 4 feet high. The miners worked a good part of their day in a crouched position or on their knees, with water dripping all around them.
So that was the barracks for the men, and you can imagine them coming up the shaft where it was fairly warm and often humid with water dripping, and running outside in 35 below zero and making a beeline over there for their bunks to get warm and to dry out. One of the miners, Bob McGee, told me that He said when you came out of the mine, he says you ran like hell because you knew your pants were going to freeze. And by the time he got to the bunkhouses, they were quite often frozen stiff, and you just have to hang them up and dry them.
Coal was carried out in homemade cars using old binder wheels. The tracks were made of 2x4 timbers. Nothing was purchased. It was prairie farmers learning to be miners. The cars were pulled up onto the loading ramp for distribution. A steam engine provided power for the lights in the pump. It was also hooked up to a circular saw for cutting timbers from Turtle Mountain to shore up the shaft and used to pull cars out. Looking back, it seems remarkable that there were few major injuries. The work was demanding. The tunnels were cramped and hastily built, and of course, there was the regular use of dynamite. A few minor cave-ins occurred, but there was only one serious mishap when a runaway car resulted in a broken leg. Coal was purchased locally and marketed as far afield as Boissevain, Brandon, and Winnipeg. The Monarch Lumber Company, which also handled coal from out-of-province producers, decided to assist the local operators by accepting their competing product. George Kane's advertisement in several issues of the January 1934 Deloraine Times went beyond mere promotion. It highlighted the advantages of buying local. It pointed out that the lower price he offered was causing a general lowering of prices and reminded consumers of the local employment provided by the mines and related businesses. While the Nestabo, Salter, and Kane Henderson mines were the most successful operations, others nearby had the same idea. Ted and Jack Williams are seen here standing at the entrance to their Deep Ravine mine on the McLeod farm. A plaque marks the location just off Highway 21 at road number 4. Almost next door was the Pound mine, a hand-driven winch in the center and ruins of a coal car to the right were all that were left to mark the site in the 1970s. Here Les Pound poses at the entrance. The Deloraine Coal Company also operated for just a few years at this site. Two things happened as the 1940s approached. The Depression and the drought both eased, bringing back some of the farm income. World War II, which started in late 1939, helped boost farm prices while causing a shortage of available workers. Just as depressed agricultural conditions started the coal rush, a long-awaited return to agricultural prosperity sealed its fate. This ravine that for a brief time sheltered the two busy mines is now private farmland. Years ago, fire destroyed any structures that hadn't already been dismantled. All mine shafts have been closed. Little evidence remains. Times change. The prairie farmer and the small town family no longer have much use for coal. Cleaner, more efficient, and more readily available sources of heat have come along. For decades, various pieces of mining equipment sat isolated and almost forgotten in farm fields. Almost forgotten, but not quite. Thanks to the efforts of A.D. Dirksen, who in 1970 wrote the saga of Turtle Mountain Coal, the story was revived. Then again in 1992, local educator Bob Caldwell contributed his article, Manitoba's Coal Rush, to the journal Manitoba History. Thanks to their efforts, we have a good record of an episode of local history that could well have been swept away by time. Visitors to the region might happen upon the heritage display in Deloraine Park that includes a restored version of one of the homemade coal cars found at the site of the Hainsworth mine. In Winnipeg, the Manitoba Museum features a display that includes a reconstructed coal car from the Salter mine. In recent times, the Turtle Mountain Souris Plains Heritage Association has included the story in its Vantage Points series. The association has also created a 2-panel interpretive sign placed in the village of Goodlands, the community closest to the mines. The years pass, and bit by bit, time erases the physical signs. In 1970, a visitor might find the rusted wheel from one of the makeshift coal cars. Here, the remains of a homemade scraper, once used to strip away the overburden and uncover the seam, slowly disintegrates. But while these physical signs fade, the memories remain. Those old enough to remember the days of the coal mines do so with a sense of pride and appreciation.